Hi everyone, so I wanted to show you what you need to take care of giant African land snails. I've had a few questions lately and I thought it'd be easy just to do a video just to give an overview so you can see what sort of things you need. So first of all is you need a nice secure tank. I'm using a fish tank with a lid. You need a nice secure lid so your snails don't escape. So like this fish tank lid has got a flap that you can lift up to feed the fish, and I've glued that down so that's never moving again. Obviously check that there aren't any holes big enough for snails to get out of. So you can use a rub, which is the really useful box, like a plastic tub with holes drilled in, or you can use like a fish tank like this. Just make sure there's plenty of ventilation, but also you don't want the ventilation to be big enough for snails to get out. Then what you need is a really good layer of substrate. I'll show you a bit later on. I've actually got it so it goes deeper at the back and it's shallower at the front. So first of all, here you can see I've got a mealworm dish, just a shallow dish. That's what you need to put some water in. Some people don't recommend putting water in for the snails, but I find my snails love it and they regularly lean over it and drink, so I provide it for them. I only put in a little bit of water though, like I would never fill that mealworm dish to the top. What I do is I'd put like probably about a third of it full of water and then just top it up each day as it evaporates or gets drunk by the snails. If the water level reaches the edge of their shell when they stand in the dish, if they can fit in it, they will suffocate. I've also got plastic plant pots, and as you can see demonstrated by Alvin there, they like to go into the plant pots because it's nice and dark and feels secure for them. So you need a couple of plastic plant pots, depending on how many snails you've got. So they've got like a nice hide. They won't always use it, but sometimes they will. Especially if you can angle the plant pot so it's quite dark inside, they'll tend to use it more. You need a permanent supply of calcium in the tank, which they must have access to daily. So that's why I use a cuttlefish bone. They also need some fake plants because they need stuff that they can hide under, hide behind, or burrow around. It just makes them feel more secure and more and safer, because that's what they would hide under in the wild. So I've got some fake leaves which are just strung up at the back with a couple of hooks, and I use these ones which are like they almost feel, they're fabric ones, so they're nice and soft. Just check you don't have, I wouldn't recommend the plastic ones if they've got sharp edges. You need to check. Some have had sharp edges and I don't like those, so I tend to go for these fabric ones, and they've been fine. I've used these for months and I haven't had any problems with mold or mildew. I also have this very shallow leaf dish which I use for either water or for their snail mix. Snail mix I only give once or twice a week depending on the consistency of the ingredients, like how much protein and stuff's in there. So the rest of the time it has water in. Lots of veggies, and as you can see they're most of the way through a bunch of veggies that I put in last night, and I've left them there at the moment because Theodore's still eating, but later on I will change it. The substrate is cocoa fibre, which comes in like a block, and you just soak it in water to make it turn into the soil. At the front it's deep enough for Theodore to burrow into, but then as you can see up the sides and the back I've made it really deep so even Rick could burrow under there. So basically what you need to do to work out the depth, go by whatever size your biggest snail is, and you need the soil needs to be a minimum of their shell length and a half. So this is designed so Rick could go under if he wants to, so that's like a shell and a half depth of substrate for Rick, and then all the other snails are fine with that. You need a hydrometer and thermometer. I don't recommend these cheapo ones for the hydrometer part. The hydrometer part doesn't seem accurate, but the thermometer part is pretty good, and I've tested it against multiple things. And you want to keep the tank at a range between 20 and 25 degrees centigrade. I've found you can get away with about 18 at the lowest, 18 degrees centigrade, but after that they start getting really sluggish, and obviously if they got too cold they would hibernate, and I prefer to avoid hibernation because I've had snails that have hibernated and then they don't always come back from it. I've also got one of those stick-on hydrometer, thermometer things that sticks on the back on the inside of the tank. It's like an analog one, but it's fell off at the minute, so I'll stick that back on. I always have two things that measure temperature and the moisture, because obviously just to make sure. You also need a spray bottle with dechlorinated water in, so you can spray the tank down daily to keep it nice and humid in there. And you can either use the fish tap safe stuff to dechlorinate it, or just leave the water standing out in an open container overnight for 24 hours and the chlorine evaporates, which is what I do. So that's the main things you need for a large snail tank. And you can go online to there's like a snail tank calculator thing to tell you how big to do the tank depending on the size of the snails you've got. As you can see, compared to Theodore, this tank's massive, and Theodore's not that much smaller than the rest of the babies, so they've got plenty of room at the moment, but this probably won't be their forever tank. I'll either have to get another tank this size and half the amount of snails in it, depending on how big they get to, or they'll have to have something bigger, but that's fine. I'll worry about that later on. This tank will do them for at least the next year or so, so there's no worries about that. But I'll put a link into the snail tank calculator to give you a good idea of how big your tank should be for your snails, depending on their size. Obviously the previous tank I had was suitable for them at a smaller size, but obviously now they've outgrown that one, so they're in this one. I was nervous about putting them in a glass tank, but then I remembered the ones I had years ago were in a glass tank and they were perfectly fine. So, because obviously the concern is if they fall off the roof, would they bang the sides of the tank and hurt themselves? But I find that's a rare occurrence, and they're pretty good at not falling off when they're small. I find it's only Rick really is one that's prone to falling off because he's heavy. Then if you've got babies or eggs, you're going to need a much smaller container. In here, this is like the smallest little Komodo terrarium thing that they do, and in here I've got some eggs because my snails have laid eggs. Now obviously I haven't kept all of them because they've laid so far this year 545, so I haven't kept all of them. I've kept about 28, and some are from the first clutch, some are from the second clutch. I want to see if they'll hatch and work, but if you do hatch any eggs, be prepared that you're looking after them for the rest of their lives, because it's going to be very difficult to sell them. And also you do need to be prepared to look for genetic defects and cull where necessary. So obviously that's what I'm seeing at the moment. So they need somewhere a lot smaller, because if they have difficulty finding food, they'll spend all night walking around in circles, and then they won't gain weight as well, because babies really just need to be able to come up to the surface, munch some food, and then go back down and have a sleep, because you'll get that good growth when they're babies. But I'll go more into that if this actually works for these snails. I've only successfully ever had eggs hatch once, so I don't know if this will work. I'm keeping them at the same parameters as the other tank, although as you can see, looking at the hydrometer, thermometer, I do need to spray a little bit of water in there, because you do need to keep them moist, but you don't want the eggs to get soggy or they get mouldy. If you've got baby snails, this size tank will suit them perfectly fine for their first year, depending on the number, because again they need to be able to find food easy without wasting lots of energy searching around all night for it. Once they're hatched, they need all the exact same food the adults do. So if I go back over here now, you can see this is their full setup, and I hope this helps you and gives you an idea of what they need. Make sure you give them a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, mainly vegetables, and then you need 20 to 25% protein, which is why I provide the snail mix. That has a lot of like mealworms, sunflower seeds, that sort of thing in, and obviously they need a constant supply of calcium. But yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. Hopefully I've covered everything. Oh, you also need a heat mat if your house is cold. I'm keeping the room the right temperature for them at the moment, but in the winter I do have a heat mat that I use, and you need a thermostat for that as well. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.